Tonight we begin in a small Roman village, far from the grand cities and far from anything that might feel important or urgent. A place where the days move slowly and where nothing remarkable is expected to happen. And as you settle in, you can imagine the faint outline of low stone houses resting beneath a wide, pale sky. The roofs made of curved clay tiles that have been warmed and cooled by many quiet seasons. And there is no need to hurry because this story will not rush you anywhere. It will simply follow the soft and predictable rhythm of one ordinary day. The morning light will arrive gently, touching the edges of wooden shutters and creeping across a simple packed earth floor. And somewhere a door will open with a mild wooden creak that no one pays much attention to, because it happens every day in exactly the same way, and sandaled feet will step outside onto the dusty path that runs between the houses, leaving faint marks that will fade as the hours pass. A clay jar will be lifted, not quickly and not heavily, just steadily, carried toward a small well at the center of the village where water waits in cool silence, and there will be no dramatic conversation there, only quiet nods and soft exchanges that blend into the morning air. A broom made of bundled twigs will brush slowly across a threshold, gathering yesterday's dust in small, patient strokes. And the motion will repeat again and again without urgency. Smoke will rise in a thin, pale ribbon from a simple oven where bread is being prepared, and the scent will drift lazily without drawing much attention, because it too is part of the ordinary pattern of life. Chickens may wander across the yard in an unhurried line, pecking at the ground with steady persistence, and somewhere a child may sit on a low step, tracing shapes in the dirt with no particular purpose. The sun will continue its gradual climb, never leaping, never surprising, and shadows will shorten in the most predictable way, stretching and shrinking as they have done for countless quiet days before. Nothing unexpected will interrupt this rhythm. Nothing loud will disturb the stillness, and as you listen, you may begin to feel the steady pace of this Roman village settling around you, calm and repetitive, and entirely without excitement, allowing your thoughts to slow and soften as the simple morning continues to unfold in the most ordinary way imaginable. As the morning continues to unfold, the village settles deeper into its familiar rhythm, and the light that was once pale and thin becomes warmer and more certain as it spreads across the open space near the well, touching the rough stone edges and the worn wooden beams that support small shaded porches. And nothing changes quickly, because in this place change is never in a hurry. A man steps out from his doorway carrying a simple wooden stool, placing it in the same spot where he places it every day. And he sits with a slow, careful motion, adjusting his tunic before resting his hands on his knees, looking out not at anything remarkable, but at the same dusty path he has seen since childhood. A woman nearby kneads dough in a shallow clay bowl, pressing and folding with steady, patient movements, the soft sound of her hands against the mixture, repeating again and again without variation. And she does not rush, because the bread will bake when it is ready and not before. A thin dog wanders lazily between houses, pausing occasionally to lie down in a patch of sunlight, breathing slowly, unbothered by the mild sounds of daily work. From a small garden behind one of the houses comes the faint rustle of leaves as someone bends to inspect herbs growing in narrow rows, touching them lightly, perhaps removing a dry leaf, perhaps simply observing, and the motion is small and unimportant. A cartwheel in the distance turns with a soft, uneven rhythm as it is pulled along the outer road beyond the village. But it does not stop here, and it does not bring news or urgency. It simply passes, as many carts do. The air grows slightly warmer, not dramatically, just enough for sleeves to be rolled back and for shadows to shorten further beneath the steady sun. No one announces the hour, yet everyone seems to know it by the angle of the light and the quiet signals of habit. Conversations remain low and simple, focused on grain and weather and the condition of sandals that will need repair before long walks to nearby fields. The day does not build toward anything. It does not promise a surprise. It only continues in the same gentle pattern, and as the village breathes in this slow, predictable way, you may feel your own breathing becoming just as steady, matching the calm and unremarkable flow of a Roman morning that asks nothing of you except to listen and rest. By the time the sun has climbed a little higher, the warmth settles evenly across the clay walls and tiled roofs, and the village continues without urgency, as though it has agreed together to move only at a measured pace. In the open space near the center, a young boy carries a small bucket of water from the well to his home, walking carefully so that only a little spills onto the dusty ground. And he does this as he has done on many mornings before, without complaint and without excitement. The water leaves a darker trail in the dust that slowly fades as the sun dries it, and even this small detail happens gradually, almost too slowly to notice. An older man sits beneath a simple awning, repairing a worn leather strap, pushing a needle through the material with patient, steady pressure, pulling the thread tight, then repeating the same motion again and again, each stitch nearly identical to the last. The rhythm of his hands is quiet and consistent, and there is no rush to finish because the day is long and the strap will hold when it is mended properly. Nearby, two women exchange a few soft words about the coming market day, not in anticipation, but in simple acknowledgement that it will arrive as it always does, bringing the same traders, the same goods, the same slow exchanges of coins and grain. A faint breeze moves through the narrow paths between houses, carrying with it the mild scent of baking bread and dry earth warmed by the sun. Chickens wander lazily across the courtyard, pecking at nothing in particular, pausing often, tilting their heads as if listening to the stillness itself. No loud sounds break the pattern, no sudden events demand attention, and the village remains wrapped in its ordinary routine. The light continues to brighten, but never becomes harsh, settling gently over the scene, softening edges and casting long, mild shadows that seem to stretch and rest along the ground. And as each small task is repeated with the same calm precision, the steady sameness of the morning invites your thoughts to slow, to loosen their grip on the present, and to drift quietly with the unchanging rhythm of a Roman day that moves forward without effort or surprise. As late morning settles gently over the village, the warmth becomes steady and even, resting on rooftops of curved clay tiles and along the pale stone walls that hold the coolness of the night inside them. And everything continues in the same unhurried pattern that has shaped countless days before this one. A woman carries a woven basket of figs from a small storage room into the open air, placing it on a low wooden table where the fruit can breathe, and she sorts them slowly by touch rather than sight, pressing each one lightly to feel its softness before setting it down again in nearly the same place. Across the narrow path, a potter sits beside his wheel, turning it not quickly, but with a calm, steady motion of his foot, allowing the clay to rise beneath his damp hands in a gradual, patient column that widens and narrows with subtle adjustments, and there is no urgency in the shaping because the vessel will take the time it needs to become what it is meant to be. A pair of sandals rests outside a doorway, drying in the sun after being washed, their leather darkened by water and slowly lightening again as the hours pass, and no one watches them, because everyone understands the quiet work of drying happens without supervision. From a shaded corner comes the soft, repetitive sound of grain being ground between two stones, a circular motion that has been repeated so many times that it no longer requires thought, only the gentle pressure of hands moving in calm rotation. The breeze that moves through the village is faint but persistent, brushing against hanging cloth and stirring it just enough to create a slow sway that continues for several breaths before becoming still again. A child sits on the ground, tracing lines in the dust with a small stick, drawing shapes that have no purpose and no permanence, and when another footstep passes nearby, the lines blur and disappear without regret. In the distance, beyond the last row of homes, the fields lie quiet under the sun, rows of crops standing in patient order, unchanged from one glance to the next. No bells ring, and no voices rise above a murmur, and the air carries only the mild blending of earth, baked bread, and warm stone. The village does not lean toward afternoon with anticipation. It simply remains where it is, balanced in this ordinary moment, allowing time to stretch softly and evenly. And as you listen to these small, unremarkable details, you may feel your own thoughts growing slower and lighter, settling like dust in warm Roman sunlight, until there is nothing left to do but rest in the steady calm of a day that asks for nothing and promises nothing in return. As the sun begins its slow movement toward the middle of the sky, the light grows thicker and more settled, pressing gently against the stone paths and flattening the soft shadows that earlier stretched across the ground. And still the village continues without any change in tempo. A farmer returns briefly from the edge of the fields, carrying a small bundle of herbs tied with a thin cord, not because the work is urgent, but because it is part of the pattern that repeats from one day to the next. And he sets the bundle on a wooden shelf inside his home, where the scent will dry slowly into the air. Inside another house, a clay lamp sits unused on a ledge, its wick trimmed and ready for evening, though the day is far from finished. And its quiet presence suggests that night will arrive in its own time without needing to be hurried. Near the well, two neighbors stand in the shade, speaking in low, even voices about the condition of a boundary wall, not with concern, but with a mild acknowledgement that stones sometimes loosen and must be placed back where they belong, and their conversation moves in circles, much like the grinding stone that turns grain into flour. A dog lies stretched along a cool strip of shade beside a doorway, breathing steadily, barely lifting its head when someone passes, and then lowering it again, as if the effort of noticing is too much for such a warm and ordinary hour. The sound of sandals brushing dust is soft and repetitive, blending into the faint rustle of leaves from a nearby olive tree, whose branches sway only slightly under the weight of still air. A thin line of smoke rises from a small cooking fire and drifts upward without hurry, fading into brightness so gradually that it is difficult to see where it ends and where the sky begins. Nothing demands attention, and nothing breaks the rhythm of simple tasks performed in quiet sequence. A woman folds a length of linen carefully along its worn creases, smoothing each edge with deliberate hands before placing it in a chest that holds many other linens folded in exactly the same way. Even the insects hum at a low, constant tone, circling lazily above the sunlit stones. The village does not grow louder or faster as midday approaches. It simply deepens into stillness, as though the warmth itself encourages every movement to become smaller and slower. And as this steady repetition continues, you may feel your breathing match the calm pattern of the place, unforced and even, drifting gently through a Roman afternoon that unfolds without surprise and without end. When the sun finally reaches its quiet height above the village, the light becomes almost motionless, resting evenly on rooftops, doorways, and the narrow lines between stones in the road. And the air feels thick but not uncomfortable, simply present in a steady, unchanging way. Many villagers withdraw indoors for a short rest, not from exhaustion but from habit, and wooden doors close with soft, careful movements that make hardly any sound at all. Inside one small home, a man reclines on a simple bench covered with a woven cloth, his hands folded loosely over his chest as he listens to the faint outside sounds that drift in through the open window. The distant murmur of voices, the occasional shuffle of sandals, the quiet cluck of a chicken that has found a patch of shade. In another house, a mother sits beside her child who has already fallen asleep on a mat, and she smooths the child's hair once and then again in the same slow motion, repeating it without thought, as if the repetition itself is more important than the act. Outside the well stands undisturbed for several long moments, the rope hanging straight and still, the bucket resting against the stone edge where it was last placed. The fields beyond the village shimmer faintly under the midday light. Rows of grain standing upright in patient silence, unchanged by the passing of a single hour. A cart left near the edge of the road casts a compact shadow beneath it, and the wooden wheel does not turn, the iron rim warm against the dust. Even the breeze seems to pause, leaving the leaves of the olive tree nearly frozen in place, their silvery undersides barely visible as they hang without movement. Time during this hour does not rush forward. It stretches gently like fabric laid flat across a table, smooth and without crease. No announcements are made, and no events interrupt the stillness, and the village accepts this quiet center of the day as it always has. Gradually and almost imperceptibly, a door opens again, then another, and a figure steps back into the light with the same calm expression as before, as though nothing has changed except the position of the sun. And as the afternoon begins its slow descent, you may notice how the sameness of these small details forms a steady rhythm, one that asks nothing from you except to follow it softly, to let your thoughts loosen and settle, and to rest within the ordinary calm of a Roman village that continues exactly as it always has. As the afternoon slowly leans away from its highest point, the quality of the light begins to soften in a way that is almost too subtle to notice, and the village resumes its gentle movements without any clear signal that rest has ended. A man steps back to his potter's wheel and places his hands once more upon the clay, which has waited patiently beneath a damp cloth, and he presses it upward again with the same steady rhythm as before, allowing the vessel to rise a little higher than it was in the morning, though the difference is small and not especially important. Nearby, a woman lifts a small jar of water and pours it carefully into a shallow basin to rinse lentils for the evening meal, watching the clouded water spill over the edge and sink quietly into the dust below. The sound is faint and repetitive, a soft pouring followed by stillness, then pouring again. Two older men sit along a low wall warmed by the day, speaking in unhurried tones about the harvest that will come in some weeks, not with anticipation, but with mild acknowledgement that seasons move forward whether discussed or not. Their hands rest on their knees and occasionally adjust the folds of their tunics in small, absent gestures that carry no meaning beyond comfort. A child carries a bundle of thin sticks gathered from the edge of the road, placing them one by one beside a doorway where they will later feed a cooking fire, and each stick lands with the same light wooden sound against the others. The olive tree now casts a longer shadow that reaches farther across the ground, though the change happens so gradually that no one points it out. From within a house comes the slow scraping of a bench being moved slightly closer to the doorway to catch the cooler air that will arrive later. A hen crosses the path with deliberate steps, pausing once to peck at something invisible before continuing in the same direction. The sky remains clear and wide above the rooftops, its color unchanged except for a softness that deepens by degrees. Nothing remarkable occurs, and no single moment stands apart from the next. The village breathes in this steady, measured way, carrying forward its small tasks without urgency. And as the afternoon lengthens, you may feel the rhythm grow even slower, like footsteps that become lighter and farther apart, inviting your thoughts to follow them gently toward a quiet and effortless rest. As the afternoon continues its gradual descent, the warmth begins to loosen its hold on the stones, and a faint, cooler current of air moves through the narrow lanes without announcement. The change is so gentle that no one pauses to remark upon it, yet sleeves are adjusted and doors are left slightly wider open. In one courtyard, a woman grinds grain between two flat stones, turning the upper stone in a slow, consistent circle that produces a soft, steady, rasping sound. The same sound repeated again and again without variation. Fine flour gathers in a shallow ring, and she brushes it inward with calm, deliberate fingers, then turns the stone once more in the same measured motion. Across the lane, a man repairs a simple wooden stool, tightening a cord that binds the legs together, pulling it firm, and then testing it with quiet pressure before nodding to himself without expression. A small boy sits nearby, tracing lines in the dust with a stick, erasing them with his palm, and drawing them again in nearly the same shape. From the fields, a pair of workers return at an even pace, carrying tools over their shoulders, not speaking loudly, but exchanging a few low words about the soil's dryness, words that drift away before fully forming. The well becomes active once more as a bucket lowers with a muted scrape of rope against stone, descending into darkness and rising again with a slow, heavy steadiness, droplets falling back in a rhythm that matches the turn of the wheel. Shadows stretch longer across the path, connecting one doorway to another in soft gray bands that merge without clear edges. The olive leaves begin to stir more noticeably now, though still without urgency, making a quiet brushing sound that blends with distant footsteps and the faint clatter of pottery being arranged for evening use. Smoke rises again from a small hearth, thinner this time, curling sideways before dissolving into the pale sky. Nothing accelerates and nothing demands attention, and the village settles into this later hour as though following instructions written long ago. Each action remains ordinary and predictable, unfolding in the same calm sequence as countless afternoons before. And as the light continues to fade by small, patient degrees, you may feel the repetition drawing your thoughts into a softer space, where details blur gently together, and the steady rhythm carries you onward without effort. As the light continues to thin and soften, the village begins its slow and nearly imperceptible transition toward evening, though no bell rings and no voice announces the change. The sky shifts from pale brightness to a muted gold that settles evenly over rooftops and low walls, and the dust along the road takes on a slightly cooler tone. A woman stands at the doorway of her home and shakes out a woven cloth with two calm motions, then folds it again along the same creases it has held for many days. Inside another house, lentils simmer in a clay pot, releasing a faint, steady scent that drifts outward and lingers in the still air. The surface of the stew trembles in small, repeated bubbles that rise and disappear without drama. A man carries a small oil lamp from a shelf and inspects the wick, trimming it carefully with slow fingers before setting it aside for later use. Nearby, a child stacks small stones in a short, uneven tower, then removes them one by one and begins again in the same order, untroubled by the simplicity of the task. Along the path, two neighbors pause to exchange a few quiet sentences about the day's weather, not with strong opinion, but with mild acknowledgement that the sun was warm and the breeze arrived late. Their voices remain low and even, blending with the soft rustle of olive branches overhead. The well stands quiet now, its rope hanging straight and unmoving against the stone. Chickens gather closer to their enclosure, stepping in a slow, wandering line that requires no guidance. A dog lowers itself onto the ground beside a doorway and rests its head on its paws, blinking at nothing in particular. The long shadows that once stretched across the lane begin to dissolve into one another, forming a single gentle dimness that settles evenly across the village. Doors remain open, but the movement within them grows less frequent, as if each household has agreed without speaking to reduce its pace at the same gradual rate. The air feels steadier and cooler against the skin, and the colors of clay and stone fade toward softer shades. No single event marks the arrival of evening, and yet it arrives all the same, in small, consistent increments. The village accepts this dimming with the same quiet patience it has shown all day, allowing tasks to finish one by one, until only the simplest motions remain. And in this steady unwinding of activity, your thoughts may begin to slow as well, following the gentle decline of light toward a calm and effortless stillness. And now the final light withdraws, almost without being noticed, leaving behind a sky that is neither bright nor fully dark, but gently suspended between the two. One by one, small oil lamps are lit inside the houses, each flame steady and modest, casting a soft circular glow upon plastered walls and simple wooden tables. The flames do not flicker wildly, they remain quiet and contained, illuminating clay jars and woven baskets in warm, muted tones. Outside, the lanes grow still, the dust settling into an even surface, undisturbed by footsteps. The well stands silent in the dimness, its rope barely visible against the stone. From within the homes comes the faint rhythm of evening routines, bowls set down carefully, sandals placed beside doorways, low voices speaking fewer and fewer words. A mother smooths a blanket across a sleeping child with slow, repetitive strokes, her hand moving from shoulder to foot in the same gentle pattern again and again. An older man sits on a stool near the doorway, looking out into the deepening dusk without searching for anything in particular, simply observing the steady fading of shapes into shadow. The scent of extinguished hearth fires lingers lightly in the air, mingling with the earthy smell of cooling stone. Somewhere, a wooden shutter is drawn closed with a soft sliding sound, then another, until the village presents only narrow slivers of lamplight through small openings. The olive trees stand as dark silhouettes against the sky, their leaves now almost motionless. No announcement declares that the day has ended, yet the ending is clear in the stillness that spreads evenly from house to house. The steady pattern of labor and conversation has dissolved into rest, and the village returns to a quiet state that feels familiar and undisturbed. The lamps will burn for a while, and then they too will be dimmed, leaving only the calm darkness that settles without resistance. In this final calm, nothing demands attention, and nothing asks to be remembered. And as the ancient village drifts fully into night, you may allow your thoughts to follow the same slow descent, loosening their hold on the day and resting softly in the quiet, where everything is simple, predictable, and at peace.